Hello and good day. My name is Erin Grimmy, and I just want to take a few minutes to introduce myself. I am a medic as well as an instructor of flight nurse course in the U.S. Air Force. I'm stationed at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio. I was introduced to this course, goodness, almost a year ago now, by one of our critical care doctors who brought this to our attention. And the reason it kind of piqued my curiosity is because in my course, we are probably at least 50% simulation for our students. And granted, I've never had to take a formal course on how to run simulation or what is the right way to debrief and things like that. So over the course of this past year, it's been rather fun because a lot of what we've learned, I've taken back to my duty section and talked to them and mentioned, hey, maybe, we should change this, or maybe we need to, think about doing some things differently. So it's been a pretty exciting time so far. But all right, so now that you know a little bit about me, today I'm going to talk about exercise design and development as my Tech Talk presentation. Let's begin. Our outline for today, what I'm going to talk about is, first I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to describe this technology. Then I'm going to jump into state of the art, kind of what's going on and what guides what we do. Next, I'll discuss the steps of exercise design and development process. Of course, there's a process for it. I'll discuss a few of the strengths of this design and development process, as well as some of the limitations of it as well. Next, I'll talk about how it relates to modeling and simulation and how this, ties into what we've been learning. Next, I'll talk about how is it used today, as well as why is it important? Why do we need exercise design and development? Why can't we just do what we want to do? And lastly, I'm going to talk about where is this headed in the future? Okay, so what is it? What is it that we're talking about? Exercise design and development. Just to let you guys know, I really didn't know a whole lot about this, but the topic interested me when I was looking over the list of possible topics because I used to work in a readiness office and we did a lot of these exercises and I didn't really understand everything that was involved in it, as well as being in the military, we're used to playing in exercises and, as a young sergeant or a young airman, oftentimes we're not sure why. Why do we do this? Why do we have to do this every month? What is it that we're accomplishing by this, other than, oh, we just have to check the box to get it done. There is a reason behind it all. And then last year, of course, before, COVID shut everything down, I was helping a few other senior NCOs over at our medical group who were tasked to design an exercise, multiple players, multi-day, and they asked if I would like to be a part of it as a aeromedical evacuation subject matter expert. And of course, I was like, that sounds amazing. So I said, yes, of course I would like to help them, but that has since been still put on hold, and I'm still trying to wait for that. And so as I said, I don't know a whole lot. I didn't know a whole lot about this. So I went on the web and I actually took 2 CBTs that are offered by FEMA. One is Introduction to Exercises and the other was Exercise Design and Development, so that I could, get a better understanding of how is this done? Why is it done? There has to be more to this process than just somebody coming up with an idea saying, hey, let's make an exercise for a tornado, for example. So it actually was kind of cool. So there's information available, and that's actually where I got a lot of my resource material, and some of the slides as well were from that FEMA, and you'll see that at the end. Okay, so exercise design and development, as I said, I kind of thought of it, or if you think of it as we're designing a fake scenario, but fake in that, it could easily become real depending on the way of the way that the world changes and culture changes and people do crazy things. And so it's really something that could easily happen. And I thought of it as, you're writing a script. So movies follow this theme, or writing a book would follow this. You need a setting. Where's this going to occur? When is it going to occur? What time of day? Is there multiple settings? Does it happen across, one part of town or another part of town? You also need key players or the characters involved. Who is this going to impact or influence? You have to have a plot, of course. What is going on? What is it that is happening? What happens? How do they respond? Then if you have the climax, so what life-altering event occurs? Again, is it the tornado? Is it a flood? Is it a school shooting? Is it something happens that changes that normalcy as to what's going on in that location? You have the chaos and the panic that sets in. So after any emergency, think about it. People don't know what to do. They don't fully really understand what's going on. So that initial step of chaos. Next, you're going to have the resolution phase. This is where things are starting to happen. Things are working their way to get back to that normal state again, because we can't continue living in that chaotic environment. And then the ending. And I think of the ending as these are the lessons learned. This is where we've identified problems, problems in communication, or what didn't work the way that we wanted it to. So that's how I see exercise design and development in its basic form. So why should we exercise? Why is this important? Well, exercising gives us a set of tools to help prevent, prepare for, respond to, and recover from disasters. And you'll see these steps come up again. Now, we know that there's only so much that we can prevent, right? We can't prevent weather. We can't prevent, mass shootings or we just can't prevent a lot, but maybe can help mitigate some of the after effects of it. And then prepare for. We want to be able to be as thoroughly prepared for these events that could happen just in case they do. How are we going to respond to them and then recover, as I said before, that resolution stage? This gives us a shared understanding among different areas. It fosters interoperability and collaboration because we don't work in a bubble. We don't respond in a bubble. We don't. Oftentimes, these situations are not limited to one particular area. They're across the board. They impact a lot of people. It helps us to work together to plan, train, and exercise. So, of course, we know the way that you train and how much you plan will depend on how your situation, if or should it ever arise, how it will go. So the better prepared you are, the more comfortable you will be, the more calm you'll be in handling these situations. This validates plans and capabilities. It answers that question, is what you have, is it working? Will it work? The plan that you have, should this situation occur, does this plan cover what we need to do? Or are there gaps? Oh, and there, we moved right into it. Identify gaps and opens opportunities for improvement. Because, again, until the situation really occurs, or we train as if it occurred, we will not know those gaps. We'll not know, hey, we could do this better. Which is why us in the military, we like to exercise, don't we? All right, a little bit more. Continuing on. So we're going to get into it a little bit in the next slide, but just for your essay, our nation has national preparedness goals. And these goals are what help drive our exercising, what we do, why we do it. It clarifies the responsibilities and the roles. It identifies those gaps, develops performance. So individuals, because like I said, we don't live in a bubble. We can't train in a bubble. And again, identifies those areas for improvement. So I thought this was kind of good. Exercise, as defined by Merriam-Webster's, is something performed or practiced in order to develop, improve, or display a specific power or skill. So developing and improving a skill. And as a verb, it's to practice in order to train, strengthen, and development, which perfect definition, right? Because as we are doing these exercises, we are training, we're working together. We're strengthening bonds, we're strengthening our knowledge, or maybe we're developing new ways of doing things, new processes. So that's what exercise is. Exercise improves our readiness as a nation, as I said, those national preparedness goals. It improves readiness by involving the whole community. Think about multi-agency, multi-players. So an emergency occurs. Who would have a role? I think of the fire department. I think of the police department, medical. Do we need EMS service? Are those first responders on scene? Can they get to the scene? Even down to city officials and waste management. Maybe utilities. Did an electrical line go down? Can the power company shut off power, or is there a problem with our water supply? Can they get to what they need to? So it really does involve the whole community to take care of these disasters as they come up. It also provides a way to evaluate operations and validates those plans, like I said before, reinforces teamwork. We got to work together, and you might as well do it on an exercise before real world starts, and then who knows what happens. Can identify capability gaps and areas for improvement. We always want to improve. Demonstrates a community resolve to prepare for disastrous and catastrophic events. So when I think, a couple of years ago, all those tornadoes that went through the South, how do you recover from that when your whole town is destroyed? Where can people go to get medical help? Where can people go to get clean water? And it really takes the whole nation, because people from all over the country went to help them and, took them fresh water and clothing and food and whatever they need. So it really, is that community effort to help everybody. Planners should first identify the pertinent risks and assess the potential impacts associated with each risk. So here it talks about the threat hazard identification and risk assessment is a good starting place for the priorities. And we'll talk a little bit more about priorities later. All right, so we know why exercises are important. So a little bit of state of the art. As I said, we don't just come up with any sort of idea as to, hey, let's exercise on tornadoes. No, we utilize guidance, and this guidance comes from multiple sources. The Presidential Policy Directive 8, or the PPD 8, which it could have changed since then. I think this was 2018, it was at 8. We also have our National Preparedness Goals, or the NPGs, and the National Preparedness System, the overall system, the NPS. It is kind of interesting because these same guidances impact what the military does for readiness as well, in addition to following additional guidance. But again, the military is not so far off of what civilian preparedness is either. Let's talk a little bit more about these. So as I said, the Presidential Policy Directive 8 is basically the nation's approach to national preparedness. So this is what comes down. This is the overarching directive. The National Preparedness Goals is the cornerstone for how we implement the presidential policy. So there are 5 capabilities or 5 mission areas across our capabilities. And these 5 mission areas are prevention, protection, mitigation, response, and recovery. So these goals will fall, the national preparedness goals fall within those 5 mission areas. And then the national preparedness system. So this is the mechanism the nation uses to build, sustain, and deliver the core capabilities, which falls under those 5 mission areas of prevention, protection, mitigation, response, and recovery, in order to, with the goal of a secure and resilient nation. So this system helps to define the process that communities can use to identify the preparedness goals. And the framework provides guidance, so clarification and assignment of roles and responsibilities, the core capabilities for the specific mission areas, critical tasks, and then direction for delivering these core capabilities as well. So this is what guides what it is that exercise design development, this is where the guidance comes from. All right, a little bit more. So state of the art. So this technology, oftentimes use of simulation during exercise implementation is going to enhance the realism. And we'll see that as technology and culture, they help to drive the change for the future. You can find multiple examples from state emergency services. Online, I found, I believe, New Hampshire was a big one. So they had their whole design and development process posted. And so it's out there. So nobody really has to create this from scratch. There's multiple examples. These exercises are gaining more widespread acceptance. So it's becoming more popular. As we're seeing more disasters strike. And again, disasters are anything from weather to, mass casualty type situations, to crashes, to, goodness, you name it, anything that involves, multiple people, multiple agencies, impacts a large amount of people, that's a state of emergency. And more personnel are starting to see the value in training for disasters. As I said, it's getting more common for these disasters to strike areas. And so as people are seeing, hey, this tornado happened in this little town, it could happen in my town. What would I do? Am I ready for it? Do I know how to handle this situation as it occurs? So it's becoming more widely accepted. All right, the exercise cycle. So overall, this is run by, it's a program management. The exercise cycle is a common planning methodology provided by the Homeland Security Exercise and Evaluation Program. So this is where we talk a little bit about that program. And it's for use with all exercise types. So basically, we have the design and development phase, the conduct phase, evaluation, and improvement planning. And regardless of the scope or scale of the exercise, it's going to include all of these entities. So let's talk a little bit more about each step. All right, so the steps of the process that we want to look at, and we'll dive into a little bit more in depth. So first of all is our design phase. So we're going to talk about the scope. We're going to talk about objectives, how to properly identify objectives. Then we're going to dive into the develop phase. And here, it's a progressive development. Next is the conduct, or I think of this as the action phase. And lastly, the evaluation. This will include, what are the expectations? What did we learn? What happened on this exercise? How can we change things? Do things need to be changed? Maybe it worked seamlessly and perfectly. Maybe not, but what can we do to improve, right? Because one of those things that we talked about earlier is we want to identify areas for improvement. So let's look at some of these steps. All right, exercise design phase, so scope. So the scope involves the type of exercise. It involves the participation level. How far do we want to take this exercise? How big is it going to be? We want to identify the duration. How long is it going to be? Is it going to be a couple hours? Is it going to be a day? Is it going to be a multi-day? And then the parameters. What are our clearly defined box, I guess, that we're working in? So, as I said, the scope has to be clearly defined. It informs the team's decisions. So here it also includes the audience, the number or the range of individuals who are acting on this, those who are affected, and then the hazards involved. So again, was it a tornado? Is it a flood? Is it, what is it that we're trying to test? And then the resources required as well. So you think the design, so this is kind of the build up for that story. Like we need to have those clearly set boundaries on it. We want to make sure that we're keeping the scope realistic. So keeping it realistic, being able to clearly define the problem and set the priorities. So as much as, we want to plan a scenario and we want to test, hey, can we plan for when Godzilla comes to attack, San Francisco, or maybe those killer sharks and, they have lasers. We want to make sure that we're prepared for if that happens. On that realism scope, I think it may fall a little bit to that unrealistic side of it. But all joking aside, we need to keep our scope realistic. What could happen? As I said earlier, that fake scenario that could easily turn real. All right, exercise objectives. So there are two types of objectives. So we have exercise objectives and we have performance objectives. So our exercise objectives are what the organization wants to achieve. So here, can we test rapid response? Can we test crowd control? Are we testing communication? So we want to make sure that our objectives, exercise objectives, are clearly defined. And then performance objectives. So this is what our players should do or what they need to know what to do under specific conditions in response to a real world event. So what are the performance objectives? What do we want them to do during our exercise? And these need to be clearly stated because this is going to drive everything else. So they need to be clearly stated. All right, so how do we get those objectives? So a lot of us have probably heard this before, using the SMART acronym. So specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. For specific, this is kind of those 5 W's, the who, what, where, when, and why. So what are those? It needs to be measurable. So can we, is it, numeric or identifies quantities, observable actions and outcomes, things that we can see. Is it achievable? Can players do what we ask of them? Do they have the resources? Do they have what they need to do what we ask? And then is it relevant? Again, this links back to those national preparedness goals. Is it relevant in our scenario? And then time bound. So we need to clearly define our time limits. Is it a couple hours? Is it a couple days? How long do we have? And again, relating back to realistic. So using the SMART objectives. And knowing that word choices make a difference. So we want to be able to have observable behaviors. So using action words: assess, clarify, examine, explain, operate, prepare, define, identify. So those words there on the left, things that we can observe instead of the vague words such as know or understand or appreciate or be aware of. Those are things that I can't see that you understand. I can't see that you appreciate communication. So using the appropriate words make a big difference. All right, so after our design phase, it's then time for exercise development. So this is a continual process. Exercises develop over time. and gradually get more complex. Part of the development phase is logistics. Again, do we have a location that's, safe and secure? Do we have resources that we can tap into? And then what is our control structure and communication? How are these entities going to communicate with each other? Who is in control? Safety. Safety is always a concern during these things. Safety for the participants, safety for the observers, and just safety of the whole scenario in general. As well as, do people know that it's an exercise versus real world? I know that can get pretty tricky there too if you're, say an active shooter or something, making sure that people know, exercise versus real world events. And as I said, this is a progressive approach. So each exercise tends to build upon the previous exercise. So with each one, we're going to increase the simulation. We're going to add additional players. It's going to get bigger and probably more realistic over time. And then, so as I said, we're going to use a progressive approach. So progressive exercising. So this is a program of exercises tied to a common set of priorities. So each exercise is going to build upon the other, as I mentioned, using more sophisticated techniques, requiring more preparation, time, personnel, and planning. So it's going to build up in scale. So maybe, you do a couple exercises during the beginning of the year, and it's all going to culminate at the end of the year with a great big, week-long exercise. We're going to bring in all the key players. So you can test entities separately and then make sure that you're testing them together to see if the process really does work. And then the exercise complexity. Again, exercises can be low, medium, high complexity. It all depends on the needs of what it is that you're testing, those goals. All right, so complexity is going to build up from the different levels. So think of it like the stair steps here. So we have low complexity and medium complexity. So these can be discussion-based exercises. So seminars, they can be those tabletops where people just sit around the table and let's talk about these policies and procedures, and can we identify gaps just by reviewing these policies in place. And then your high complexity tends to be more operationally based or functional exercises. So it could be games or those full-scale exercises where everybody's going to jump in and participate. So we want to build up to the next level. All right, so once our exercise is designed, we have it developed, we are ready to conduct the exercise. Time to implement. So I think of this like go time, or in a movie, it's, action. So it's going to depend on the type of exercise. So again, is it a discussion-based or is it an operational-based exercise? So that'll depend on how we conduct it. We're going to make sure we gather all personnel involved. So the participants, the evaluators, we're going to have some facilitators. We probably have some safety monitors as well. We want to make sure that we're briefing them for each group. So we want to give each of those groups of personnel different briefings. So give them the overview, give them the background, and definitely those clear expectations. This is what we expect you to do. We're going to provide exercise handouts and documentation. So as part of that design and development phase, we make these documents, player guide handbooks and evaluation tools. So we want to make sure that we're giving these to those personnel involved so that they have time to review it and look at it. And then it's go time. And lastly, our last step in the process is the evaluation. So this is still an important part. So even after the exercise is completed, the evaluation is where we're going to get those lessons learned. So we want to gather up the observations that the observers made. This is our data collection time. Sometimes it's, the after action report. Participants can write about it. Basically, anybody can write up what happened, what they saw. This is that continuous improvement. So how can we make this better? What didn't work? Like, we want to identify what didn't work, but we also want to identify what worked really well and why. Why did this work? Or How can we make it better? I know for us in the Air Force, we use the wing inspection team. They're called WIT. They're the kind of that evaluation team. And then I thought this was good. So evaluators should not be a distraction or interfere with the exercise play. So exercise is not the time to stop and teach somebody, how to splint an injury, or it's not time for that. It's I need to stand back and evaluate and watch you to see if you know what you're doing, but I should not be jumping in to help you. They kind of just need to be in the background, not really even noticed. So if you're ever an evaluator, remember that. All right, so what is expected during these exercises? We need to have, again, a clear understanding of objectives, because if those objectives are not clear, everybody kind of is doing their own thing. They don't really understand what's going on, and that's not helpful for anybody. We want to stay on track. We can use a script, which is the MSEL, or the Master Scenario Events List. What is this, you ask? Well, we're going to look at it. All right, so the Master Scenario Event List. This is generally used for complex exercises, so those big multi-agency, operationally based events. It provides a timeline and location for all expected exercise events and the injects that help keep the scenario going. So evaluators have to keep a copy of this because, again, it keeps them on track. Their expected location, observing actions. It just kind of puts the players where they need to be. So components of this MSEL. So it has that chronicle listing that supplements exercise scenario. It gives the times. It gives, the synopsis, any of the injects that needed to be added in so that players can continue moving forward. The intended player, whether it's, agency or individual players, hey, this part of the exercise is testing, the PD or the EMS system. It also includes expected participant responses. So what is it that we expect them to do? Objectives, core capabilities, and then any sort of just special instructions as well. There's 4 types of actions that participants can carry out. So verification is, they're gathering or verifying information. Consideration, they negotiate, they consult with each other, they get, they consider what else is going on. Deferral, they can defer an action to later, hey, this isn't a priority, so we'll wait. And then decision. Decision is, they're deciding to deploy resources, or maybe they deny resources. And then the expected action. So as I said, these are the actions that we expect to see. These are what we want participants to do. So we have to let them know, hey, we want you to simulate this, or we want you to actually carry out, if you would medically treat this person, I want you to medically treat them. So they're very involved, and it gives a lot of information, but very important to keep those exercises on track. Okay, so we now discussed about the exercise cycle and components. Now let's talk a little bit about strength of exercise design and development. So exercises help us to clarify roles and responsibilities, who is responsible for what in an emergency. It improves that interagency coordination. It makes sure that we're all on the same page, that we're working together for the same goals, that, this department isn't working independently from this other department, but yet I need, the waste management, but I can't get them because they're doing their own thing. It keeps us all on that same page. It helps us to find resource gaps. Maybe we don't have enough litters in the medical facility if something were to happen. It helps to develop individual performance. So as personnel are out there performing these exercises, they get a better understanding about what's going on. And then again, always identifies opportunities for improvement. So we always want to move forward. We want to make those improvements. Okay, so what are some of the limitations of exercise design and development? Well, design limitations include, you know, personnel, time, resources. I don't have the personnel to do this. I don't have the time to develop it. Exercises are only going to be as good as what your participation is. So are your participants vested in this? Do they have clear direction? Do they have clear guidance? Do they understand the why? And then oftentimes exercise fatigue. I know some units have experienced this before. They exercise over and over and over again, yet I still have to do my daily job. So just having that fatigue, I'm doing this to simply check a box. I don't understand why I'm doing it, or I don't I'm not engaged. So that participation and that fatigue, we have to overcome that. And we have to make sure that we're meeting the objectives while staying within resources and personnel constraints. All right, exercise. We want to make sure it's realistic. So how do we make it realistic? One of those ways is through modeling and simulation. So simulation is a method of implementing performance of a model or combination of models over time. So this helps us to add versatility. It can be very cost savings, and it increases that fidelity. It makes it one step more real than what it would be. Modeling and simulation support decision-making processes by providing human and or computer feedback to players during exercise play. So it helps them to see what is the impact of their decision. Hey, if I move this patient who has a broken leg and they scream in pain, oh, maybe that was a bad idea. So modeling and simulation can help provide that real-time feedback. So simulation is used for enhancements of these exercises. You can do as much realism as possible. So I think, tying into the senses. So visual is, can I see what's going on? Auditory, is there sounds of sirens in the background? Are there sounds of screaming people? Tactile, things that I can touch. Can I move this, splintered log? And then smells even, making it as realistic as possible. It helps to achieve a realistic environment. So are we outside in an actual environment, or are we in a hangar with a simulated environment? Are we mimicking that aircraft crash and we have an aircraft fuselage that we get to use to make it, a more realistic, actual, yet simulated environment? A lot of it goes back to creativity. Modeling and simulation is all about that creativity. How can we make it real? What can we do? What can we use to help increase that realism? We think about moulaging patients. So whether it's mannequins or live patient models and actors, can we, put some red Kool-Aid around them? Or do we have something to mimic blood? Do we have something to mimic injuries? Can we have torn up clothing if we need to? People and props. So again, those full-scale exercises. So people, are they the victim? Can they look like they're injured? Or maybe using props, fake smoke, burnt boards or beams, to make it look like, if there was a crash or a tornado. Can we put those things out there to help increase what it would realistically look like? How is it used today? How is exercise design and development used today? So we know, the military also uses the FEMA framework to design and develop exercises as well. Most of the time, readiness sections are POCs for unit level exercises. So they're the ones that help to make sure, hey, we did our active shooter for the quarter. This is how we did it. They're usually the ones to carry that out. And then there's operational readiness exercises. These tend to be those larger, it involves more entities type of exercises. Multi-unit base-wide practices. So maybe the base is having a, simulated active shooter. So that gets out there. Or ours has been tornadoes lately that we've been doing as well. So how, and it specifies who's playing, who's exempt, and what is the participation level expectation. And also more training between military and civilian sections. So again, military sometimes is called upon to help with civilian cleanup. And why not, right? Because sometimes, hey, it could happen, I'm here in Dayton, so if something happens in the area, you've got an active duty base, you've got a reserve base, you've got, the community. If something happens, we all pull together and can work together. So it strengthens those relationships. Why is it important? So using those national preparedness goals, training is just vital to minimizing the damage. It's not a matter of if something happens, but when, because as we watch the news, it's definitely when the next thing will happen. And we don't know what it is. This helps to test policy, procedures, gaps. It helps to improve and educate everyone. So if you think, again, back to that set of tools to help prevent, prepare for, respond to, and recover from disasters. And this can help us when we're designing sim scenarios, It's a very similar process. So exercise design and development can be used when we're doing simulation scenarios. Where is it headed in the future? So I see, more advanced scenarios, additional players, resources, bigger exercise, adjustments to policy and procedure, because, as things change, we need to adjust. Changes occur constantly, so we need to make sure that our plans adjust as well. And again, that close working partnership between the military and civilian facilities, we have to work together. We all live in this nation together, so let's work together. We can look for patterns in disasters. We can't predict them, but we can be better prepared, and exercising is one of those ways. All right, in conclusion, exercise design and development. So it can be as small or as large as you need. We know that it is very objective driven, and these objectives need to be clearly defined. We can use the SMART acronym, clear expectations. So exercise design and development is it's a complex, time-consuming process, but definitely well worth it. And utilizing modeling and simulation. So this only enhances our training. It can be as minimal or as extreme as necessary, but all in all, being creative and having fun will go a long way. All right, today I talked about our technology, the state of the art. We talked about the steps of the exercise and development process. Remember, it's kind of that circle, the strengths, limitations, how it relates to modeling and simulation, how it's used today, why it's important, and where is it headed in the future. And as I said, these are the 2 FEMA courses. They're free, they're online, they're fairly easy to go through. So if you would like to find out more information, then I would suggest going to those. All right, I am Erin Grimmie, and I thank you all for listening to my presentation, and have a great day.